Extreme heat waves are becoming more frequent and are associated with increased complications and greater mortality and vulnerability among people with the most prevalent chronic diseases: cardiovascular, metabolic, such as type 1 and 2 diabetes, neurological, mental health, and respiratory conditions. In a field where knowledge remains limited, it is essential to promote projects that allow the identification of at-risk populations and the establishment of new preventive and public health strategies. The MútuaTerrassa Research and Innovation Foundation is in a privileged situation to become a leading reference in the study of the effects of climate change on these chronic diseases, as it possesses access to a large population database, with a territorial sample of more than 300,000 people. More than 15 years of digital health records integrating all levels of public healthcare, enabling a high level of population traceability. Agreements with other leading partners in complementary areas such as climate science, environmental science, metabolomics, epigenomics, and artificial intelligence. The Foundation, supported by the recently created Chair of Health and Climate Change of the University of Barcelona and MútuaTerrassa, is able to promote groundbreaking research with the potential to define new preventive strategies in public health. The first projects are already underway, addressing various lines of research. For example, the analysis of how the thermal comfort conditions in homes affect the health of vulnerable patients during heat waves. The analysis of the impact of climatic and environmental factors on the progression of chronic diseases through predictive models. Or the study of the mechanisms linking climate change to these diseases to identify susceptibility profiles, clinical progression and prevention measures. And this is just the beginning of a paradigm shift in understanding the effect of climate change on health. It is time to act and support research that can change the future of our health.
So, wonderful. Thank you very much. My name is Ewout Van Ginneken. I'm the director of the European Observatory on Health Systems and Policies. And I'm allowed to moderate this second panel here, which will be a tough act to follow on the first panel, because I think we've really got a very good impression on what is going on in Spain in terms of national responses. I like also really the focus that we're having here, which is not just adaptation to the climate crisis, but also mitigation. And in this panel, we are going to move towards the international agencies and the international response, and also how that can support perhaps the national responses. Also how we can perhaps coordinate better between each other, but also really to get some ideas and perhaps fresh thinking and examples from outside. As you can see, I have a formidable panel, 5 people in it. I will take you through really quickly and then we just get started because they all have so much to say. The first one up will be Robb Butler, Director of Division of Communicable Diseases in WHO Euro. He will start off with his presentation. Then we have Neira from WHO, Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health from WHO Geneva. Then we have Domènech. I know. I'm trying to learn all the names. I mean, people were struggling with mine. I'm sometimes struggling with others too. But you're very welcome from the European Commission, Director of OneHealth for the European Commission, the DG Santé. Then we have Rita Arujo, who is working for the Environment, Climate and Health DG Research and Innovation. So a really interesting component that we talked about earlier a lot in the first meeting, what kind of research, and I'm happy to hear, really super keen to hear from you what DG Research is doing to support countries in implementing these policies. And then we will hear from Raquel Gonzalez from Médecins Sans Frontières, and really also about the global struggle that you're seeing and some of the policies and strategies that you follow. But first, we go over to you, Robb, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ewout. So, In 1987, I was a member of my school rock band. I was the guitarist, and I was very proud to be a member of this band because most of the other band members were 1 or 2 years older than me, and the lead singer was the coolest guy. His name was Ben Leake. He was the coolest guy in the school, and I wanted to get closer to him and try and be a friend of this superstar of the school, the hero of the school. So I suggested that our school band wrote to the Rolling Stones and asked if we could support them on their next world tour. The letter never left the school, but I did make a good friend by even suggesting that we wrote to the band. I feel a little bit like that today. I'm really the support band to the rock star, and our rock star at WHO and truly globally in the climate and health arena is Neira. So I feel as if I'm a little bit the warm-up band and the support, because 80% of what I present today will be her work. So it's absolutely terrifying to stand in front of her particularly. It's less terrifying to stand in front of you. But I'll do my best, Maria, and I will constantly try and make eye contact to see if I've got things right. She's forgotten things about climate health I have not yet learned. So, where do I start? I start with the 194 member state adopted general program of work, where under 6 foundation blocks, one of these relates, the first strategic objective relates to responding to climate change and escalating, and as we've already heard today, a very present threat and danger to us in the 21st century. And as you can see from the 2 output indicators, 3 output indicators, but the 2 subsets of this strategic objective, they are delineated, not clearly black and white, but by the 2 ways in which you've formulated and framed today's discussion: mitigation and adaptation. And a global health strategy that has been brought forward, as you see, is incorporating this. At a global level, as Maria will undoubtedly share with us, we have a very strong, renewed member state support for working in this space of climate health. A World Health Assembly resolution, a global action plan being brought to the World Health Assembly this year, again, under the rock star's guidance. She has been driving this forward with the team predominantly at headquarters and the respective regional offices, where I sit in one of those regional offices in the European region. We've also seen growing attention to climate and health in climate at the COPs. From the early days in the UK establishing at COP26 the health programme, really raising the ambition. I took part in Dubai, where we saw in the UAE a declaration on climate change and health, and of course now moving to Belém. And along this lifeline, we've also seen the birth of ATTACH, the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health, in 2022, and now 95 countries, and I'm looking at Maria for a confirmation, she's nodding, it's 95 countries and partners now part of this transformative alliance, which I would advise you all to refer to. COP30, high expectations, a health day on the 13th of November. I will quickly be taking you through, of course, where I'm taking you at the moment is policy and mandates. I'll then look at the Pan-European Commission that was mentioned by Dimi earlier, and then sprinkle in a few examples from the European region. But for COP and the upcoming COP, a global stocktake on climate resilient health systems will be presented by the ATTACH, by the Alliance of Transformative Action on Climate and Health, and also a Belém action plan, with various other commitments, as we heard at UNGA, being positioned in advance of the COP30. When we talk about climate and health, as has been pretty evident from this morning, we start with heat. Everybody starts with heat. And indeed, heat and heat mortality, and you have 2 presentations, I believe, on this over the next 48 hours, is a good place to start. But I wanted to explain and maybe to argue that heat is just one of the cascading and compounding factors on the heat impacts of climate change. These extend to labour capacity loss, migration, as we'll hear shortly, and the disproportionate effect and impact of the climate on the most vulnerable and marginalised populations, food insecurity, vector-borne diseases. Secretary of State talked a little bit earlier about arboviruses, vector-borne, tick-borne diseases. I'll talk to these in a moment. I think for me, on this slide deck, as I went through it quickly, one of the most alarming facts that I could put between these slides is that over the last 60 years, we've seen a 10% increase in the land surface of the globe that would accommodate malaria. In 60 years, 10% more land accommodating malaria. I'll come back to vector-borne in a moment, of course, because it relates to not just malaria, but dengue, leishmaniasis, West Nile fever. In the European region, we're the fastest growing, or fastest warming region on the planet. We have approximately 130 to 135,000 deaths recorded in 2023 as a result of excessive heat, changing rainfall patterns. We've seen, of course, more intense and frequent natural disasters. And of course, here in the European region, indeed, Minister Garcia Gomez, the Minister of Health of Spain, just speaking to us a few days ago about the impacts, of course, in Spain of the devastating floods and wildfires, and she quoted 3,000 lives being lost, but also a summer of heat impact that ranged between 11 to 33 billion euros. That's as real a health disaster as it could be anywhere. Droughts and desertification. I've just returned from Central Asia, from the Aral Sea, where we have 62,000 square kilometers of toxic dust where water once sat. You can imagine the health impacts, what we're seeing in terms of respiratory, cardiovascular, what we're seeing in terms of childhood and birth deformities, reproductive health issues. So huge, different areas of the region, of the European region, seeing the impacts very much play out in different ways. But in a 4-degree scenario where temperatures would increase on average by 4 degrees by the end of this century, we would see about 25% increase in rainfall, and of course, the more intense and frequent natural disasters that would accompany that. We would also, of course, in that scenario of increased rainfall and, of course, increased temperatures, see an increase of something that is grossly underestimated, given the poverty of the surveillance systems in our region on foodborne diseases. Salmonella would increase by somewhere between 25 to 35% over the next 50 years. We've already touched on vector-borne diseases. I'll start with a number on this, which is 2,254. That's the number of attacks on healthcare in Ukraine. 2,254. A shocking, shocking number. But the healthcare workers in that country are now having to deal with additional threats. They have West Nile fever back. They are having to go back to school and learn what malaria and dengue is. And they have, of course, tick-borne, well, not of course, but they have tick-borne encephalitis. And of course, now trying to introduce vaccines that will prevent against tick-borne encephalitis. I myself have just had my 3rd dose of my 3rd jab of vaccine on tick-borne encephalitis, because there's an area of my local forest in Denmark that has been cordoned off because of ticks and because of the threat of tick-borne encephalitis. I never thought I would see this in my lifetime, but it's on my front door. These are deeply, deeply personal impacts of climate change. The building blocks were beautifully outlined by Demi earlier. I won't go back through these building blocks, but to say that those building blocks are a way in which we can start thinking about an index of measurement across these 10 core components. And I would invite you all to look at that. We won't have time today. I will try and stick to my 15 minutes, Chair. We won't have time to unpack this, but it's a very useful starting point and the indicators thereunder in terms of the measures, because of course it allows us to measure where we are as a planet, particularly in terms of the their national adaptation plans and how well these national adaptation plans are accommodating these components. And as you can see, it's a very mixed picture if we look to the graph to the right. If we look at the European region particularly, we can see some maybe positive points, but we see some also very worrisome points. In the European region, from the global survey that was conducted, and this only covers 37 of the 53 countries in the pan-European region in which I work, we see that over 90% of countries in the region have established a coordination mechanism. Indeed, we heard from the Minister of Spain just 4 days ago, about how the multi-sectoral intergovernmental observatory had been established in Spain. Another very good example on why Spain really is a champion in terms of climate health, both adaptation and mitigation. Of course, we've also seen rising participation of ministries of health and health representatives in the COP delegations, which is another indicator that we think is fairly significant. But the news is not all this good. 48% of the European region with vulnerability and adaptation assessments and health national adaptation plans, but when you consider how many of these are fully implemented and far less than 50% that are partially financed, we are far, far from where we need to be. So main barriers, of course, as you could have imagined, are, of course, financing, particularly at national levels in this field, insufficient external support, and I'll come back to this point a little bit later, the intersectoral collaboration that we see in most countries as missing. Now, we've talked about this earlier, mitigation, adaptation, useful frameworks through which to look at the next 2 days, a lot of work taking place in these areas and a lot of promise. I want to move us into maybe a more positive outlook. And to do this, I want to move into something that Dimi brought up earlier, which was the Pan-European Commission on Climate and Health, who are looking at mitigation adaptation. This is the commission as it stands at the moment. It is chaired by the former Prime Minister of Iceland, Katrín Jakobsdóttir, and we have a chief scientific advisor on board with us, Sir Andy Haynes of LSHTM. And then, as you'll see, a real cross-section of ex-ministers, ex-commissioners, environment, health included, and financiers who are sitting on this commission. A very clear focus and intent, but I think it's important that I say to you, this is not something that we've just picked up as a good idea and thought, okay, let's run with it. We've tried and tested this model already, as Professor Figueras will attest. As one of our scientific advisors, Josep took part on the Monti Commission, which was a commission that looked at sustainable development and health off the back of the pandemic and looked at what we could learn from the pandemic. And some of the recommendations, in fact, the majority of the recommendations from that commission had head of state impact and action. And I include here the development of a pan-European centres and network for disease control, which was a very positive step forward, and the establishment of a health board on the G20. And it was in this group of commissioners back in 2021 that entitled the Monti Commission, because Prime Minister Monti sat as its chair, the Monti Commission put forward the idea of also a pandemic treaty and a global board, as they say, on the G20, which is very progressive. So we're trying to use this model. We've had 3 hearings so far. We will now go into a hearing with mayors looking at urban health, and then we will finalize our hearings for these commissioners with a spotlight on health systems, where I'm really inviting those people particularly, including the observatory who gave a fantastic presentation this morning, to the table for those hearings. This is our timeline for the commission. It's an exciting one, but basically this commission will come with a call to action at the World Health Assembly in 2026, in May 2026, where we will also start adapting those different recommendations for different audiences on pragmatic action to be taken forward. I really didn't want to go much further than to say, I know you have an awful lot of very impressive examples that will be presented to you. As I say, we've had the Minister of Health with us recently. We heard from the State Secretary this morning. We heard from David. We heard from the government of Catalonia. The amazing examples. We have similar examples across the region. I was just thinking as we were talking in that last session about the pharma swap under the Netherlands Green Deal 3.0 and exciting initiatives that's seeing now 1,400 pharmacies look at the expiry dates on medicines and drugs and basically swap, exchange. It has reduced carbon emissions by 1,700 kilograms. It has reduced the cost by somewhere around 2.5 million euros. It's a great example. We have examples like this all over the region. The picture on the top right, before I stop, is my local hospital in Hillerød in northern Denmark, where I live. This is basically been pitched as the hospital of tomorrow. It's not yet built, but it's built on a lowland floodplain. So they are arguing that this will be the next generation in terms of adaptation and mitigation in hospital care settings. So watch this space. We've heard from Bulgaria in our hearings about how they're centralizing and mainstreaming medical curricula. Only 15% of medical curricula includes a component on climate change currently in the European region. Bulgaria, however, going full force on introducing across all medical faculties, which is terrific. And then early warning systems, examples that I could give you if I had more time, but you'll hear more of and a little bit later. So, Chair, with just my last two slides, as Dimi said, really exciting evidence and assessments at our disposal today. We have a whole range, and forgive the slides, I can see they've slightly jumped out of format. We have a whole range of support mechanisms at WHO headquarters and in the European region, a whole range of materials and on-the-ground support that we can deliver through particularly our European Centre on Environment and Health, which is based in Bonn, Germany, financed by predominantly by the Ministry of Environment of Germany. Challenges, I think, have really been put forward already by the speakers. Oops, excuse me. I don't know how to get myself back. There we go. Siloed approaches we discussed. We've also seen, I think as a behavioral scientist and somebody who's not a climate health scientist, I'm shocked with how much we admire the problem and how much this is everybody's business, but it's nobody's responsibility. And I feel that there's something here when I move to opportunities on accountability that we still haven't quite grasped as a community yet. And I'll talk to that if we get an opportunity when we sit back down in the panel. Financing, a huge constraint, as I've already said. Less than 0.5% of all climate finance goes to health, and then, of course, ways forward. And I think these are very important. It's something that Secretary General said this morning. As a behavioral scientist, I think this framing is very important, and I know Maria's spoken to this in the past as well. This importance of a focus on a positive vision, on positive framing, because it can be very, very dark when we consistently explain the challenges that we're up against and the shift it's going to take. So every health facility has a renewable energy, a vision for the future of every community covered by a heat health action plan and more resilient. I think I'll stop there with thanks, and apologies if I went slightly over, Chair. I'll take the chair.
I think you went... Yes, please. Rob, I think you were perfectly in time, and well, you laid it all out for us. First of all the huge challenges that we're seeing, also the work you're doing, COP30, I heard, the Pan-European Commission for Climate, all very good developments. Then you also showed lots of work, also for specific areas. And perhaps if I may, can I ask you about one then perhaps, and that would be workforce, which has been coming up and is a huge, I think, international issue. What you are doing also to support the workforce with these challenges, both in terms of how to adapt and to mitigate. Oh, yes. You can take this one probably. Here. There you go.
I think.
Yeah, switch on. Yeah.
Got it.
Good.
So workforce, I think that was a very interesting sort of proposal that was put over this morning, earlier this morning. I think it was Dimi or one of the colleagues said, you know, why don't we make the workforce the champions? I'm a little bit sensitive and a bit hesitant on this because I think I have 12 programs in my division and I could go to 3 conferences a week and be told what the workforce should do. Mm-hmm. We have a 1.2 million deficit in health workforce in this region currently. The burden on each and every worker, and I go to a conference last week, we were talking about how healthcare workers should pay more attention to prudent use of antibiotics and prudent prescribing. We need to retrain them. We asked them to think about HIV and marginalization of HIV positive patients in healthcare worker settings. You've got to go back and there's another curricula for you. They've already got enough on their plate. The healthcare worker so I'm a little bit sensitive when we start talking about, I think we would all agree that health workforce need to play a role. But it's the steps that a hospital or a primary, secondary or tertiary levels of care can play that would allow us not to take that more neoliberal step of placing burden back on the workforce. I mean, look at the ways in which we can rapidly change waste management systems, the ways in which we can change transportation systems. Josep was talking earlier, digital home-based new models of care that are not just good for the environment, but make economic sense. Yeah. These absolve the workforce of having to take more responsibility, but would be changes that would be transformative in terms of the 5% mitigation that Dimi talked about earlier. Indeed, the health sector, if it were a member state, it would be the 5th largest contributor to CO2 emissions on the planet, if it were a country. So there's plenty to be done there, but I'm not sure, I think they have a role, but I'm not sure they should be the starting point.
I think it's a very good point. You could perhaps also argue from the other way around that if we do this well, we can have our cake and eat it, right? So it could also help them in a way to improve the efficiency of the system and perhaps relieve the workforce to an extent. But I think those would be really good topics also to discuss here. Now I would really like to go to Maria. Robb was full of praise and he raised the bar astronomically high for you. So please, also your contribution here.
Of course, I will start by saying, Robb, thank you very much. I mean, really, I tried to be in a rock band as well, but my mom decided that piano lessons were more appropriate for me. And nobody wants a piano player, a Formula 1 classic music on a rock band, so I couldn't. But thank you so much for including me on your virtual rock plan and band. I feel very, very happy, and thank you so much for your words. There is nothing else than satisfaction of having contributing to this incredible, incredible agenda that we have in front of us. Can I do a very quick survey here? How many people is totally fluent in Spanish? Okay, yo creo que voy a hablar español. Is that okay for the English-speaking guys?
Yes.
You have translation, no?
Yes.
Creo que va a ser más justo si... sorry, the moderator maybe. Is that okay? You have translation?
We have translation, yes.
Robb, you have translation? Otherwise you will lose your rock star intervention.
No, we're fine, we're fine.
Okay, a couple of things. The presentation of Robb right now, the presentations at the previous table, sorry. Perdón. Las presentaciones de Robb ahora mismo y las presentaciones en la primera mesa redonda, yo creo que nos han puesto unos argumentos muy fuertes en la mesa. Y mi intervención va a ser solo eso, la estrategia de no excusas, sin excusas. Ya tenemos una evidencia científica muy fuerte. No quiere decir que no necesitamos más. Por supuesto, tenemos que seguir acumulando evidencia científica y asegurarnos de que no queda ningún cabo suelto, de que nuestra comunidad académica, que estoy segura que aquí está muy bien representada, continúa a dar respuestas a esas preguntas que quedan en el aire, muchas veces intelectualmente importantes, pero tal vez no tanto para la acción que tenemos que tomar. Así que primer pilar de esa estrategia de no excusas es continuar con la evidencia científica, focalizando siempre que sea posible en identificar y responder a aquellas preguntas que van a tener un mayor impacto después en la ejecución. Segundo, estamos enfrente de un panorama geopolítico particular, vamos a llamarlo así, un poco desafiante, que hace que necesitemos ser más estratégicos que nunca, tengamos una mejor comunicación que nunca, mejores tácticas de comunicación que nunca y consigamos que esa ciencia que estamos desarrollando desde hace muchos años pueda tener un impacto gracias a una campaña tal vez diferente, más positiva, que movilice un poco más a la población, hablando un lenguaje que a lo mejor tenemos que adaptar un poco a las necesidades del momento. Tercero, si alguien nos pide resoluciones, planes globales, planes regionales, cuáles son las herramientas, los building blocks que fueron presentados aquí de la OMS, cómo tenemos que hacer la adaptación al cambio climático, cuáles son los beneficios para la salud que podemos obtener, que nadie use la excusa de que no lo sabía o no tenía suficiente información o no sabía que existían esas herramientas. Tenemos que entre todos asegurarnos de que esa no puede ser una excusa para nadie que trabaje y que tenga responsabilidad de poner en marcha determinadas intervenciones. Cuarto, COP30. Todo el mundo habla de COP30 y tenemos muchísimas expectaciones para lo que va a pasar en Belén, expectativas para lo que va a pasar en Brasil, en Belén, y por supuesto vamos a tener una vez más un Health Day. Nos ha costado mucho llegar hasta ahí, pero ahí está. Pero no os olvidéis de que COP30 no es un eslogan. COP30 quiere decir que son 30 años que estamos negociando con cambio climático, ¿ok? Y esto tiene que tener un punto donde imponemos como responsables de salud pública otro nivel de ambición y otra velocidad. Si esto decimos que el cambio climático es la crisis climática, es una crisis de salud pública, y que debe ser verdad, porque creo que esa frase la inventé yo hace unos años, o sea que debe ser verdad. Si es realmente una crisis de salud pública, hay que darle la vuelta y responder como si fuera una crisis de salud pública. Lo dijo Javier Padilla esta mañana. Vamos a responder como salud pública con la velocidad y ambición con la que normalmente respondemos a una crisis. Nadie aceptaría que estuviéramos 30 años negociando si fuera una crisis de salud pública. Así que vamos a darnos mucha prisa, somos más necesarios que nunca. Tenemos oportunidades. Una, ATACH, que Robb ya presentó, la Alianza para Transformación en Cambio Climático y Salud. Es una plataforma fantástica donde todo el mundo, hospitales pequeños, hospitales grandes, instituciones, gobiernos, están participando en esa alianza con ejemplos, con intervenciones que están poniendo en marcha para descarbonizar el sector sanitario, descarbonizar y bajar ese 5% de emisiones globales que nosotros estamos poniendo en marcha. Yo estaba buscando en mi bolso y tengo en algún sitio un blister de paracetamol, de un analgésico. No puedo hacer. Imagínate este blister. Se producen millones cada año. Imagina que la compañía farmacéutica responsable de este blister encontrara la manera de reducir un 2% el plástico que va aquí. Ya no digo más, un 2% a nivel alto de la cadena. Cuando llegue abajo, los millones de toneladas de plástico, y Fiona os va a contar mucho más sobre eso, que podríamos ahorrar. Pues eso es lo que estamos haciendo en ATACH. En ATACH, esto y muchas cosas más. Pero quiero decir, el convencer también a la industria farmacéutica, tenemos también una asociación con ellos, para que ponga en marcha innovación en cuanto al procurement, al supplies de todo lo que necesitamos en el sector sanitario, y que a través de acciones a nivel alto de la cadena, cuando lleguen abajo tengamos resultados impresionantes. Y más importante que eso, y eso tenemos que aprender entre todos a hacerlo mejor, Una vez que lo consigamos, hay que contarlo, hay que explicarlo, hay que decir qué significa eso. No es solo una iniciativa pequeña, es que hemos reducido, con ese plástico hemos reducido los químicos que iban dentro y que van a terminar en nuestro organismo también. Son iniciativas maravillosas. A nivel del hospital hay médicos motivados, enfermeras motivados, toda esa cadena de personal sanitario está muy motivado porque sienten que están contribuyendo también a luchar contra el cambio climático y esto les da la fuerza de decir, bueno, estamos haciendo algo tangible también, además de luchar contra las enfermedades. Otro punto fundamental de intervención. Hay que hablar el lenguaje de los que trabajan en cambio climático. Para nosotros, adaptación a cambio climático, en medicina, en salud pública, lo hemos inventado hace mucho tiempo. Adaptación significa prevención secundaria, si lo hemos inventado nosotros. Y mitigación significa prevención primaria, lo hemos inventado nosotros también. ¿Qué pasa? Que no hablamos después ese lenguaje. ¿Sabéis alguno de aquí lo que significan los NDCs? NDCs, sí, mucha gente lo sabe, pero no todo el mundo. National Determined Contributions, no non-communicable diseases, como mucha gente piensa. Yo le pregunté a los ministros en la Asamblea General de la Salud y me dijeron, non-communicable diseases, María, of course we know. No, National Determined Contribution. Ese es un plan a nivel nacional que cada país tiene que desarrollar y la salud hay que meterla dentro entre todos. Hay que asegurarnos y también, de nuevo, hay tools, hay todos los documentos que queráis para incorporar la salud a los National Determined Contributions. Una tarea para todos, iros a buscar el National Plan y buscar a ver cuánto está la salud ahí y cómo podemos entre todos incorporarla. Otra iniciativa más, todos los beneficios que se obtienen para la salud de la mitigación del cambio climático. Ese contarlo en positivo, el hecho de que cambio climático y air pollution es lo mismo, es casi lo mismo, es un 75% de overlap. Sin embargo, la población entiende perfectamente cuando les hablamos de reducción de casos de asma debido a la mala calidad del aire. Bueno, pues ese es el lenguaje que tenemos que usar, usémoslo, porque la lucha contra las causas del cambio climático y de la contaminación del aire son las mismas. Es mejorar el transporte público en las ciudades, es asegurarnos de que nuestros alcaldes, y este es el otro reto fundamental, los alcaldes son nuestros ministros de salud también. Los alcaldes, alcaldesas, politically correct, tienen una responsabilidad enorme. Anne Hidalgo en París, con una oposición feroz a sus intervenciones, acaba de demostrar que han reducido al 50% en 10 años la contaminación del aire en París. Eso se puede cuantificar en beneficios para la salud. Y esos argumentos positivos son los que como sector salud tenemos que utilizar, movilizar, porque la mejor manera de cambiar legislaciones, de cambiar el voto político, de asegurarnos de que hay un futuro y que demostramos que digan lo que digan del cambio climático, esto es una cuestión de salud, esto es una cuestión de pulmones, y he dicho pulmones, no otra parte del organismo, es una cuestión de pulmones. Esa broma solo lo entienden los que hablan español, pero es una cuestión de nuestra salud y cuando hablamos el lenguaje de la salud, ese health is the argument for climate action, la salud es el argumento, el motor, la motivación para que hagamos mucho más en cambio climático, porque en el fondo esto es una cuestión de salud. Cuando consigamos comunicar esto de una manera pragmática, como sabemos hacer en salud pública, cuando vayamos a las COPs con estos argumentos tan fuertes, cuando influyamos en las políticas nacionales como hicimos para que haya agua potable, nadie aceptaría abrir el grifo ahora y que el agua estuviera llena de porquerías y que además estuviera contaminada. ¿Por qué aceptamos que el aire sí? Hay una agenda de salud maravillosa y acordaros que este año celebramos los 10 años del Acuerdo de París. Leeros el Acuerdo de París de Cambio Climático. Es un tratado de salud pública puro y duro. Si lo pusieran en marcha, qué maravilla sería para la salud pública, cuántos beneficios podríamos obtener. Me paro aquí, thank you.
Yeah, and while we are still wondering what that play with lungs was, I think we're going to find out during dinner. I have a hunch.
I can say it.
No, you cannot say it. I assume that. No, this was incredibly helpful. There were so many elements that you touched upon. Like, I think the strategies also that you try to follow, especially also to reach the vulnerable. And I think that is something also that we will discuss with you, Raquel. The role of science and keep, generating evidence. And we're going to talk about that also with the Commission and the DG Innovation. COP30, again, great initiative. One question, perhaps, if you allow me, and I have this weird echo because of this thing. Communications, you mentioned it a lot. Do you mean that we need different language, perhaps? So is new terms, or do you mean different ways of getting in touch, other structures to be in touch with people on the work floor, in policy making? Just maybe very briefly your thoughts.
Well, look at this. Probably many years ago, people were speaking from there, describing science, and everybody will agree and say amen, and that's all. Today is not the case any longer. Okay, science is still very solid. We have the possibilities of produce science in a very solid and credible way, but then we still need to communicate about science. The problem we have, well, it's not a problem, but the scientific community, we love to debate about science, which is logic. Science is about controversy, debate, and dialogue, and challenging each other. When you do that openly, with the population, the citizens, they will think that you disagree. Remember the famous APCC report years ago where a journalist described some leaking messages that some scientists were exchanging among themselves, saying, oh, I disagree with this, I disagree with that. And they say, you see, even the scientists, they cannot agree among themselves. It was not true. They were challenging, of course, certain elements, very deep, very specific, which is their role, but they were not relevant for putting in place the recommendations and the interventions they were promoting. Yeah. But as a scientist now, or as a public health community, we need to observe how the populists are communicating messages now. We need to understand why they are successful. And then, of course, I'm not saying that we need to adapt, but certainly we need to use that information, that knowledge, and maybe our strategy has to remain the same, of course, because we need to promote science no matter what, but we need to adapt a little bit our tactic on how we communicate. I'm not saying that we need to become populistic ourselves, but we need to understand why people will follow those populistic statements, what told to them, and then how we can, bring them on board as well. At the COP29, I was talking with anyone, journalists, so you give a lot of interviews. And at one point, a journal from a very extreme wing right in a very important country in the world, they wanted an interview. The communication people advised me not to take it. And I say, no, at the contrary, I want to take it. Those are the ones we need to convince. Those are the ones that, okay, they will ask a very challenging questions, but certainly easy to answer if you don't try to go very technically, very scientifically, if you manipulate as well the way they communicate. So I think we need to prepare ourselves for a new revolution on communication, positive, and to talking to the citizens on something that they will be interested in, avoiding to create an elite of climate change and environment that we will keep talking among ourselves. We are all perfect, we have an electric car, we eat organic, and we need to talk to the population.
And that means all of them and that probably needs some, other skills, and not be afraid also to talk to those that we think are enemies. Great, very good inputs. I hope we'll get back to the audience later. We have so many people here on the panel, but I'm sure that we will have some time also for questions from you later. But I would now like to go, to Rosaire. Rosaire is going to do it from there. Really interesting to hear the Commission's view. DG Santé you're representing, OneHealth, so floor is yours.
Thank you. Primer, abans que res, volia agrair la invitació a la Universitat de Barcelona i molt particularment al David i al Josep per haver-me implicat en aquesta aventura. I d'entrada, jo crec que he comès dues imprudències. Una, no tinc PowerPoint, i per tant estic parlant d'aquí, però perquè és que aquestes cadires són altíssimes i són incomodíssimes. O sigui que estic més còmode aquí. I segona, que parlar després de la Maria és un repte. Jo seré una mica, com a bona europea, una mica més políticament correcta. I potser també fer una distinció respecte al que ha dit el Robb, perquè de vegades quan es parla de European Region, no sé si tots esteu totalment coneixeu bé el funcionament de la OMS. Quan parla de European Region parla de 53 estats membres. La Unió Europea són 27. Per tant, quan parlem nosaltres d'estadístiques, s'ha de tenir en compte que quan els nombres del que parla el Robb i la Maria són més importants dels que eventualment puc parlar jo. So now I turn into English, sorry about that. So I initiated 3 years ago an adventure in my professional life as a director of OneHealth in the European Commission, in the Department of Health and Food Safety. And yes, I am one of the technocratic supranational authorities you were referring to, David. So yeah. But in my department, so we cover public health and we cover food safety. And for me, the OneHealth approach, and I hope that you are all familiar with it, was quite obvious, but then we were missing this sort of the link more with the climate and environmental issues, which, as we've seen in every intervention, we are learning, I would say, the hard way, with unprecedented and escalating extreme climate events, with direct effects, in particular in Europe. And I think that, as the Barcelona Institute of Global Health said, with these more than 60,000 head-related deaths in Europe in the last summers, and as I think that it was Jan Semenza mentioning it last week in Gastein, this summer we've had in Europe, due to heat waves, the equivalent of 300 airplane crashes in a summer. So it's huge. I mean, and I think that, by the way, making the link to what Maria was saying and also on communication, we need to start using a bit these big figures, the impacts. And sometimes it's not good to, and someone was saying this before, but I think that shocking people with numbers is sometimes the most efficient way to draw the attentions, in particular when you are competing with populist politicians, as we all know. So we've talked about the more direct effects on heat, and then the more indirect effects, and in particular on infectious diseases, both zoonotic and vector-borne, and knowing that I mean, again, zoonosis represent today 60% on the existing and 75% of the emerging infectious diseases, and we've made a super painful experience with COVID. By the way, my directorate was created and the OneHealth approach precisely in that context. And vector-borne diseases, I mean, a few years ago, I was talking to my colleagues in Brussels about the problem we had in Barcelona with the famous tiger mosquito. And I didn't know that a couple of years later I would be sharing these concerns. I mean, this tiger mosquito is now in 13 member states, including Germany, and I mean, Robb also referred to Denmark and other countries. We've had only this year 27 chikungunya outbreaks in Europe, which is a new record, really, in our continent. And we also have even locally acquired chikungunya cases, for example, in Alsace, in France. And of course, all these diseases affect particularly because the population is aging, but also because the population has not developed. These are traditionally tropical diseases. We have not developed the immunity, and therefore we're much more affected. The transmission is not only with humans. We've seen the vectors transmitting diseases between animals, expanding also in Europe, like the lumpy skin disease, which is transmitted by mosquitoes and biting flies. And we've seen this in Sardinia, we've seen in France, and we've seen it also in Catalonia. And as other people also said, this obviously has a very big economic impact, reduced due to the reduced production, of course, but also the control measures like culling animals, vaccination, trade restrictions, and compensation for farmers, which is something that if you hear the political debate, and we may probably come back to this, it's something that the current political arena is very sensitive to. So in my Director General and my directors, we act at several levels with this OneHealth approach, starting by a very robust EU system to report, prepare, and respond to foodborne outbreaks. Robb also referred to foodborne diseases in close cooperation with two agencies that you probably are very familiar with. One is the ECDC, the Communicable Diseases Agency, and EFSA, the Food Safety Agency. As I said, we've also worked very much, in particular after COVID-19, on zoonotic diseases, and now we're working very, very closely and intensively on the zoonotic influenza. We're trying to prepare a plan. I may come back to this. In Europe, and I may also make a difference with previous speakers, and in particular those representing either the Spanish government or the Catalan government, in the competence in health at the European level is very limited. So health is mainly a national competence. So we need to find a bit our grade or degree of action, and one of the things, and to ensure precisely that there is this overall European approach, and one of the things that we do is monitor very closely the vector-borne diseases through, as I was saying, ECDC, the network of emerging and vector-borne diseases, which is formed by epidemiologists from national public health institutes, and the so-called vector net, which is ECDC and EFSA, which work together to do surveillance and to have a database, and they actually publish very regularly reports on West Nile and other zoonotic diseases and infectious diseases. And we also do what we call the OneHealth missions, which is basically going to member states, to the European countries, to check or to see how organized. They integrate the different mechanisms between human, animal, and environmental health in their own administrations. And these missions, which have been very much focused on zoonosis until now, they are starting to be also a lot on vector-borne diseases. But also we follow the One Health approach also on non-communicable diseases, NCDs. And as already explained, I mean, 10% of premature deaths in the EU are driven by the exposure to polluted air, water, harmful chemicals, etc., with cardiovascular diseases accounting for most of these NCDs deaths, and cardiovascular is now also a very big political priority in the Commission. And the Director General also mentioned mental health and the eco-anxiety, which is something that it's increasingly also related in the context of the relation between climate change and health. And this has been done very much in a couple of years ago by the European Climate and Health Observatory, which, by the way, this leads me to speak a bit about this observatory. I don't know if my colleagues will also refer to it. And by the way, the WHO is also in it. It's a relatively new tool that helps us to prepare and adapt to the impacts of climate change. And it's a partnership between the European Commission and the Environmental Agency, the EAA, that promotes this scientific alignment and knowledge exchange, also with other European and international partners. I mentioned the WHO, Europe in particular, but also other sectors in the European Commission, like research. And it allows us to monitor climate change health risks through robust indicators, to integrate adaptation into the health policies, and to anticipate and prevent climate health. So through the observatory, we've had several case studies for adaptation strategies, including one of Barcelona, the reshaping of Barcelona's urban landscape to improve the livability and citizens' access to green space. Others, another one in Extremadura on nature-based solutions in schools as a green way to adapt buildings to climate change, and in other places of Europe, like the flood protection measures in Norwegian hospitals. And actually, there are this year more case studies on mitigation solutions in the health sector, which, as Dimi very well explained, is responsible for 5% of the greenhouse emissions globally. We will also, or the observatory will also initiate 2 new studies on how to better understand and predict the spread of vector-borne diseases. If I go to, I was referring to the fact that the European Union has very little competence on public health, but we still have a few legislations, which is the areas where we can make a bit of an impact compared to just overseeing and steering processes. And the most important one in this context is the regulation on serious cross-border health threats, which was existing in a form of a directive before, but we reinforced as the key element of our health security framework during the pandemic, and that it really strengthens the prevention, preparedness, and response, including with an enhanced role for the 2 main agencies, ECDC and the medicines agencies, EMA, as well as the creation of a new authority, the Health Emergency and Response Authority, HERA, which is basically responsible for medical countermeasures. We have improved cross-border preparedness to extreme climate events through early warning and response systems and risk assessments for all hazards. You probably, those of you that were following EU action during the pandemic will be familiar to the Health Security Committee, which is formed essentially by the chief medical officers of all the member states and the Commission, and it was basically following and agreeing at European level on actions. The Health Security Committee has been reinforced now. It actually is able to give opinions to be followed up also by member states. And again, it has been discussing very much about zoonosis in the last at least 3 years. Now it's focusing very much on vector-borne diseases and their control. And actually, we have in a couple of weeks a joint meeting between the Health Security Committee Technical Working Group on Preparedness and the ECDC vector-borne diseases to show also that this sort of very much integrated work that we're trying to do at European level. I was also referring to the animals, where we have or animal health, where we have a long tradition also of what we call European reference laboratories, which basically support national reference laboratories in improving diagnostics, testing methods, and surveillance of serious cross-border threats. And we are now creating these laboratories also for cross-border health, for public health, in particular zoonotic pathogens, vector-borne pathogens, and food and water-borne pathogens. I am being too long. Should I start cutting?
You can maybe finish up slowly.
Very quickly, very quickly.
Good. Thank you.
Yes. We are just now preparing, well, you've probably also heard about the Union Preparedness Strategy. I think that you saw one commissioner with a big bag saying that we had to be prepared. It was a bit of a joke, but it is a strategy that integrates all hazards approach and whole of society approach. So again, very much integrated. And in this context, we are now also preparing a union preparedness and prevention preparedness and response plan, precisely to give a practical overview of the governance capacities and resources to respond to health crises. One reference to data, very important, and again, we have this European health data space that is now being implemented, where, among others, we're linking health data with environmental data, and the idea is to precisely to unlock or to unlock data, to unlock access to relevant electronic health data and to generate precisely useful insights on the impacts of climate change. I'm not going to go into other files, which is climate resilience. Many of you refer to it. Is not even actually under my responsibility, and my colleague Rita will talk about research. Just to conclude, and coming back to the more global action, you need to, I mean, we as institution, we contribute, like all the member states, to these COPs until now. And as you know, at the end, there's always a declaration, a political declaration or a commitment. Well, the US currently does not even allow to have the word climate change in a declaration. They don't accept to refer to climate change, which obviously makes our life a bit difficult, and it shows how extreme is the situation. But no, we keep pushing, exchanging knowledge, preparedness, and resilience to equip all the citizens and to protect them, as the rector said before. And we also try to improve on communication as well. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Rosaire. You touched on so many subjects and such an important service you provide basically also to all the European member states. And you were talking about also the, where does the competence of the Commission end and where does the national competence come in? I can see it's, you do a lot really also on adaptability and providing all the data and the statistics. I loved your reference also to the European health data space. I think we need to have that better data. That's the kind of low-hanging fruit where the Commission can really do excellent work for us. In terms of then, more the mitigation, that's probably more something for the countries themselves and perhaps also through the research programs of DG Research. Is that where you see it? Maybe just really, just a brief comment. Anything, it should be able to be switched on, no? That one's on, this one too. Sorry.
Well, again, this is it's not a job of one or the, here we are two people representing the Commission, but the Commission is like in a government, there's plenty of different departments, and we are just now, and this is one of my jobs, to make sure that we work together. And that when DG, the Director General for Clima or for Environment, prepare their legislations, they take health, and like health in all policies, into account. I'm not responsible, and Josep knows very well, of health systems. We also have some actions on health systems, and we work very closely with the Observatory or with the OECD, with other organizations, also in favor, but I will not now describe all the actions. No. My point was more the fact that it's necessary that we work all in the same direction. As Maria was saying, putting health in the center, which today is not obvious. When we have defense, when we have other political files, when we have a war next door, people tend to forget the
I think we all agree, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Would you like to take this, or would you like?
No, I have a presentation.
You have the presentation, we'll take it from there. Rita, I'm so curious what you will talk about and how you promote the science. We talked about it so much already today, so looking forward, please.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the importance of research and youth-funded research in particular to support policies and action in climate change and health. I will not take time with this slide because a lot has been said about this already, so there's nothing that I can add. I would just like to start by this point. It is a fact that the climate crisis is a health crisis, and we need to take urgent action, and it is a big challenge that we have to address now. So I will move directly to the EU policy landscape. A lot has been said already by my colleague José from DG Santé, but I would like to mention this, that there in the bubble in yellow you see a lot of initiatives taken by the Commission in the past years that address tackling climate-related challenges. In some situations, they tackle health also, or global health in the face of global challenges. But the new Commission, who took office in 2024, revised the political priorities and put forward political guidelines also for the next term. And you can see that this area is also mentioned in several instances of the political guidelines. So climate adaptation is mentioned, climate preparedness is mentioned, the objective of achieving climate neutrality as well, support for green transitions and development of high-value technologies that can support also these green transitions, and science and evidence is pointed out as an important aspect to inform all these policies that are going to be developed. Now I will take a minute just to talk about our instruments. So the key instrument we have at European level to support research and innovation is our framework programs for research and innovation. Currently, the framework program in place is Horizon Europe, that you see there on the left side of the slide. It is a program that is the biggest one to date on research and innovation. It has a budget of 95.5 billion, and it is divided in different pillars, so there are different instruments. You can address excellent science, in Pillar 1, you can address collaborative research that answers to global challenges and has a strong focus on impact in Pillar 2, and in Pillar 3 is more related to innovation. So health is one of the thematic areas of Horizon Europe, and that is divided in thematic clusters, and in cluster health we have a full destination dedicated to environment, climate and health, and here is where the bulk of this area of research is funded, although there are other instruments that contribute to this. Then I would like to mention the next framework program, that the proposal for the next framework program was presented before summer. It's called Horizon Europe 2028-2034. I will not describe in detail the proposal, but just would like to say that it is a self-standing program with a very, very strong focus on competitiveness. It has a budget that almost doubles the budget from the previous program, so it's 175 billion, I think. It's more than 170, I think it's 175. We still have thematic areas, but are thematic areas for competitiveness. And health is there together with biotech. I need to look there, biotech, agriculture, and bioeconomy. If we look at the research that we have been funding in the past in environment, climate, and health, I'm very happy to show this figure that shows that the allocation of funding for this area of research has been increasing, and in the last framework program here represented in brown, you really can see a significant increase. But then when we look at the allocation, because environment, climate and health is a very large area that addresses many different topics, when we look at the allocation of budget to climate change and health, you see that although in the last year it increased significantly, it's still, if you look at this picture, that shows on the top number of projects, on the bottom the funding allocated, and you see in light blue climate change, you see that still represents comparatively a small share of the funding we allocate to this area of research. And for that reason, we were in a point 2 years ago where we were thinking, okay, this is an urgent challenge that needs to be addressed, and we really need to strategically plan our funding in this area. So how are we going to do it? We started by organizing a very large conference in Brussels, and I show here this picture because the point I want to make is that we wanted to have the representation of all key stakeholders in these discussions. So we had the 3 directors from DG Clima, DG RTD, and DG Santé on the table. We also had, my colleague already mentioned, the European Climate and Health Observatory that has a fundamental role on making evidence available to stakeholders, so the director was also there. And then we wanted to have key stakeholders like WHO. We have the scientist chief of WHO in the panel. Also, we wanted to have the voice of low and mid-income countries, so we had the health minister of Malawi, and the voice from the youth, so we had the youth ambassador. This panel represents the vision and what we tried to implement in these 2 days of the conference. That was to have all the important stakeholders on the table providing input to this initial discussion. And this is a summary of the conference. So the objective, what we wanted was to discuss what is the state of the art in this area of research, what are the most important gaps, and what are the pressing needs that we need to address in the future. We identified several initial general challenges. I will not go through all of them, but just to say that this has been mentioned already. We need to accelerate the translation of research findings into policy. Data was also mentioned very prominently, so we need better data with better level of granularity. We need also to break the silos between different communities working in this area, and we need to foster interdisciplinary research in this area. And from the conference, we announced the publication or the start of the drafting of a strategic research and innovation agenda on health and climate change that would help us to define the priorities for the years to come in this area. So this is just a quick illustration of the process of development of the SRIA. Just to say that after the conference and after the initial draft, we did a wide consultation with stakeholders from different areas, from industry, civil society, research. We also did a written consultation with our colleagues from different DGs, from different agencies, from our program committee where all member states and associated countries are represented, other funders. Then we published the SRIA, and now we are working on dissemination and implementation. So just a conceptual view of the strategic research and innovation agenda. We wanted to focus on which data, which evidence, which knowledge, tools, which solutions we would need to foster with this research that we are going to fund in the future. And from there, what we would need to do also to support the uptake of these solutions that were being developed through policies, strategies, and interventions, with the ultimate goal, of course, to increase societal impact in individuals, in the communities, and in the healthcare system. The research agenda has a wide scope, so it covers adaptation of communities and populations and healthcare systems. It covers mitigation in the health sector. It covers a wide range of health outcomes, and it focuses on direct impacts of climate change and indirect impacts, and very important, we dedicated a specific chapter on vulnerabilities and health vulnerabilities and inequalities, and we embedded this aspect in all the chapters of the agenda. So having a closer look, we start the agenda with aspects that are important for any successful research ecosystem to work. Fair and equitable research and innovation, the support of the uptake of research into policy, this was repeatedly mentioned today, and also international cooperation, that in this area is very, very important because it's a global challenge. Then, based on the consultations, we identified these very important cross-cutting themes. Transdisciplinarity is key for this area of research, then behavior and empowerment and education. And then, again, health inequalities and vulnerabilities. Then we have a chapter on underpinning science, because it's very important, the data part and infrastructures, and data was mentioned as one limiting factor for the success of this area of research. Then models, tools, and technologies, and several thematic areas of research that I will change to this slide just to show from Area 2 to Area 6, you have the thematic areas addressed in the agenda. So in the health outcomes of climate change, we address the direct impacts of climate change on non-communicable and infectious diseases and on mental health. Then we have health implications of climate-related issues that are the indirect impacts on biodiversity, on pollution, on food and water safety and security. Then we have a full chapter dedicated to mitigation in the health sector, and a full chapter dedicated to adaptation, and a full chapter dedicated to implementation, which this came very strongly from all the consultations we did. We really need to understand how to best implement the outcomes of our research into practice, because otherwise a lot of investment is made and the return is not ideal. This describes in more detail each one of the chapters. You will have access to the slides, so I will not go through this one, but I will focus a bit on the mitigation one and adaptation, just to mention some of the aspects that we identified as important. One very important topic was to develop frameworks that are based in standardized metrics to understand what are the impacts of mitigation in the healthcare sector and how different parts of the sector can be changed to achieve best results. Then the cost and benefits of mitigation interventions was also very important. Something that was mentioned already, the health co-benefits of mitigation, to quantify the health co-benefits of mitigation. And then in the healthcare supply chains to invest in green procurement, in circular economy aspects, also in digitalization and in prevention. Adaptation, one important aspect was how to include health in national adaptation plans. The cost-benefit analysis of interventions was something that was very, very frequently mentioned. How to, and this is more on behavioral sciences, how to change the way that interventions are designed to make sure that the involvement of the right members of the community are taken into account. And then to invest not only on the resilience of health systems, but also on the resilience of healthcare workers. So we drafted the agenda. It was almost 2 years working on this. We were very happy with the result. We were very grateful to all the stakeholders that contributed to this exercise. But then we published the agenda. What do we do with the agenda? That's a fair question. I would like to mention very, very briefly the strategy for European life science. We realized that this is a problem at the global level. A lot of organizations and institutions are working to help to solve this issue, and this leads to a lot of initiatives being developed. So there is a strong risk of fragmentation and duplication of efforts. That's why we, together with Wellcome Trust, started the development of this initiative that aims to bring together like-minded funders from philanthropies and also public funders to work on the alignment and coordination of our strategies to fight this climate change and health challenge. Thank you very much. These are some resources that you can look at if you want to know more.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Rita. This is so helpful also when you define the challenges, slow translation into policy. That's something that, of course, we see, persistent silos that we keep seeing, the lacking data, it also came up. And then I was questioning myself, okay, how then should research change in the future? And I was thinking implementation science, and then it was all there. It was already there, so that was actually my main question for you. But then still, I wonder the way we do research and how we, how you expect us, or the research community to do research. Do you try to push them in a different way so that they interact with policymakers earlier on, or is it just really a separate strand that is all put under implementation science? If you can be really brief, because we're a little bit pressed for time.
I will be very brief. When we draft our work programs for research and innovation, we always do it in co-creation with member states and in co-creation with other directorate generals at the Commission. So policy needs is something that is really always embedded in the drafting of the work program. It's not something that is driven only by scientific gaps, but also from the policy side. Then it's true that it's a challenge then to make these research outcomes to be uptaken by policymakers, both because I think these two communities are also siloed. So I think we need to create better mechanisms to make the link from science to policy, because sometimes the languages are not the same, sometimes the time for action is not the same. So there are several challenges that colleagues also in the Commission work on the Science for Policy services.
Okay. Yeah, maybe some ideas and thoughts about that. But now I would like to go to you, Raquel. Sorry. You're patiently waiting. You'll be talking about your work of MSF and also have a bit more of a global perspective.
Ewout, ¿cuánto tiempo tengo? Son las 2:20 pasadas. Entiendo que también la gente esperábamos acabar a 1:30.
10, no? 10 minutes, is that okay, Raquel?
Yo me
Then we do
adapto,
one quick
os lo
round of
prometo.
questions and then-
Yo me adapto, pero
Yeah?
perfecto. Muy bien. Y me voy a adaptar y voy a meter todo lo que quiero meter, pero quiero empezar. Me ha hecho pensar lo que ha comentado María antes, ¿no? De cómo conseguimos, cómo conseguimos poner en valor la importancia de la lucha contra el cambio climático. Y yo, esto me ha recordado a cuando estamos trabajando en zonas de conflicto, intentamos conseguir acceso a las poblaciones y tenemos enormes dificultades porque, lógicamente, ninguno de los actores armados, sea estatal o no estatal, no le gusta que estemos allí. Cuesta mucho, es muy difícil, es muy complicado, a veces los valores no sirven decir que somos neutrales, independientes, que no recibimos fondos de ningún estado del mundo, hasta que consigues curar o dar atención médica o hacer un parto o curar a un niño de desnutrición infantil, que es uno de esos líderes locales que está blaming on you porque ¿qué hacéis aquí? Sois espías. Y entonces casi ya no hacen falta ni palabras. Entonces, no sé, María, pero cuando al final el mejor ejemplo es decir, oye, ¿han disminuido los casos de asma? ¿Han disminuido porque tenemos un buen air pollution? No sé, ahí lo dejo. Vamos a hacer un viaje fuera de la Unión Europea ahora y es verdad que, bueno, agradecer también a mis compañeros todo el mapa desde OMS, pero también desde organismos de la Unión Europea, pero sí vamos a hacer un viaje a, lógicamente, las zonas donde Médicos Sin Fronteras trabaja, que son los países menos adelantados, donde realmente, además de ya las complicaciones a las que nos enfrentamos, esta capa, ¿no?, del impacto que está teniendo el cambio climático es muy, muy evidente y muy dura en términos de morbilidad y de mortalidad. Solamente destacar, claro, que los países menos adelantados, desde el inicio de la revolución industrial hasta 2019 han aportado un 0,4% del total de emisiones acumuladas de CO2 y constituyen un 13% de la población mundial, es decir, y en 2019 solamente aportaron un 3,3%, pero el impacto en estos países menos adelantados suele ser exponencial. Este es un mapa que también, Robb, al principio desde otro enfoque, pero has dado alguna mirada al ámbito internacional. Al final lo que vemos es que las poblaciones en una situación de mayor vulnerabilidad, y cuando hablo de mayor vulnerabilidad hablo de indicadores de mortalidad y morbilidad altísimos, de emergencia médica desatendida. Y ahí es donde nos cruzamos MSF y estas emergencias médicas desatendidas, porque vamos a aquellos sitios donde sigue habiendo un número que excede la emergencia médica, un número de muertes por malaria, por desnutrición, por partos, es decir, causas absolutamente evitables. No estamos hablando de un hospital terciario de megacirugía. Estamos hablando de main killers, eso como la malaria, la inseguridad alimentaria y, por tanto, la desnutrición, el dengue. Bueno, pues estas poblaciones, ahí veis el color rojo, es donde hay un mayor impacto, donde lo que mide, bueno, hay un índice de la Universidad de Notre Dame que mide la vulnerabilidad de un país al cambio climático y su preparación para mejorar la resiliencia. ¿Qué pasa? Que cuanto más rojo está, hay una mayor relación entre la vulnerabilidad y, además, la menor preparación de ese país. Bueno, si continuamos, podemos ver que, lógicamente, África y Asia se prevé que van a ser las regiones más afectadas en términos de salud, con una pérdida de años de vida. Bueno, ahí damos unos datos y mencionamos unos datos. Pero el problema es esto, ¿no?, que es África y Oriente Medio, y desde luego África no es uno de los continentes con mayor responsabilidad en las emisiones de carbono, lógicamente. ¿Qué impacto va a tener en estas dos zonas, en el continente africano y en la zona de Oriente Medio? Bueno, pues un impacto acumulado de 1.270 millones de años de vida ajustados por discapacidad y una pérdida de productividad y unos costes sanitarios altísimos que se cifran en 2,7 billones de dólares. Esto en África. Y en Asia hablamos de unas pérdidas económicas que van a ascender a 3,5 billones de dólares. Es decir, la no mitigación, la no prevención, la no actuación cuesta muchísimo dinero a nivel estructural a los continentes, a los países, al sistema internacional, a los organismos internacionales que están tratando, lógicamente, de dar una respuesta. No voy a entrar en los riesgos y las consecuencias para la salud relacionados con el clima. Se ha hablado muchísimo, se va a hablar muchísimo más, pero sí que hay algunas estimaciones que ya están hablando de que el 69,9% de las muertes anuales en todo el mundo pueden estar vinculadas a enfermedades sensibles al clima. Pues cuidado con esto, ¿eh? Se ha mencionado ya, ¿no? Pero hemos visto el aumento de morbilidad y mortalidad en personas con enfermedades cardiovasculares, con diabetes, por las olas de calor, pero también la expansión de los hábitos propicios para los mosquitos, que ya se ha hablado también, que transmiten enfermedades como el dengue, impacto de las sequías más severas y el impacto que tiene enorme en la inseguridad alimentaria y la desnutrición. Voy a poner dos casos concretos. A ver, nos lo pone mucho más difícil a organizaciones humanitarias que estamos tratando de atender a las poblaciones, porque, insisto, todos los efectos del cambio climático se suman a otras problemáticas pues de poblaciones con falta de acceso al centro de salud, poblaciones donde muchas veces si van al centro de salud además han de pagar los servicios y la mayoría no tienen dinero para pagar los servicios. Si nos vamos a República Democrática del Congo, República Centroafricana, hay zonas montañosas, es decir, es muy complicado llegar a algunas zonas. Pero bueno, quiero poner un ejemplo de cómo hemos tratado de atender a estas personas y sí que aquí solo quiero hacer un inciso. No estoy diciendo que no haya evidencia, por supuesto hay muchísima evidencia, pero sigue faltando evidencia en estas zonas de extrema índices de mortalidad y morbilidad, sigue faltando evidencia de los impactos del cambio climático. Y me gustaría mencionar que el informe de 2023 de la R6, que es del Grupo Intergubernamental de Expertos del Cambio Climático, ahí no se mencionaba, faltaba evidencia de crisis como la guerra, como el hambre y como los desastres naturales en países menos desarrollados. Así que tengo aquí a un plantel maravilloso de decision makers que estoy segura que tomarán buena nota porque es una de nuestras recomendaciones que se incorporen en el próximo informe y si no se incorporan en este informe, pues que se tenga una mirada especial a esto. Bueno, ¿cuál es nuestro enfoque? Mitigar. Solo diré que es muy difícil. Nos hemos propuesto reducir al 50% nuestra huella de carbono en 2030. Fue un compromiso de 2021. Es muy complicado. ¿Por qué? Porque tenemos unos enormes volumen de traslado de suministros. Y en las zonas donde estamos es muy difícil no utilizar coches, no utilizar... Pero somos un poco radicales y no sabemos si vamos a conseguir la mitad, pero sí les puedo asegurar que mis compañeros, a nosotros todavía no, a los que vivimos en España, en Barcelona o en Madrid, pero a mis compañeros que viven en Holanda, que viven en Alemania, a Bruselas, tienen que ir en tren 8 horas, no se coge un solo avión. Y esto es política. Política de MSF. ¿Vamos a llegar? No lo sé, pero bueno, van trabajando en el tren sus 8 horas en vez de coger un avión. Lógicamente no vamos a cortar en cómo llevar los suministros, pero sí estamos mejorando nuestras cadenas de suministro para tratar de cada vez poder mandar más en barco, que lo puedes organizar, que tarda más tiempo, que no tanto avión. Salvo cuando realmente tengamos de este tipo de emergencias que en 72 horas tenemos que tener preposicionado un material y entonces ahí sí que hay que tirar de rapidez. Bueno, adaptación y, lógicamente, bueno, comunicación advocacy trabajamos en el informe de Lancet Countdown, que ha sido mencionado, tratando de dar ciertas evidencias de lo que vemos basado en datos siempre médicos. Hemos visto en Pakistán en 2022-2025 inundaciones monzónicas sin precedentes. Esto lo estamos viendo un cambio de patrones y estamos viendo una muchísima mayor afectación en muertes en afectados. No me voy a entretener porque no quiero dejarles sin comer y sí que, mencionar que tenemos un proyecto de anticipación de la malaria que estamos tratando, es un proyecto piloto que estamos haciendo en Nigeria, llevamos 2 años y medio haciéndolo para tratar de desarrollar sistemas predictivos de alerta temprana para predecir mejor y actuar ante cualquier aumento previsto de los casos de malaria. Es decir, cruzar datos sanitarios médicos, pero también con datos medioambientales para tratar de poder conseguir tener un patrón a medio o largo plazo, y esto también nos pasa con las crisis nutricionales, porque se está adelantando o se está produciendo más sequía, con lo cual los mercados dejan de tener comida antes, con lo cual se adelanta la época de desnutrición. También cada vez hay más malaria, con lo cual todos los programas de quimioprevención de la malaria estacional en algunos países están saltando por los aires porque están cambiando el calendario de cuándo se dan y cómo se producen. Pero estamos trabajando en este estudio piloto en Nigeria, llevamos trabajando con estos datos desde 2016 y, como les digo, el objetivo principal es mejorar la comprensión de la relación entre el clima y la prevalencia de la enfermedad. Muy rápidamente, pero quiero explicarles cómo hemos adaptado estrategias de adaptación climáticas puras y duras en las inundaciones de Sudán del Sur. Fueron tremendas, o sea, había zonas que se han quedado absolutamente anegadas y que se han convertido prácticamente en marismas. Es decir, toda la pérdida del tejido de los agricultores ya de entrada, y ya había una situación complicada de acceso a la salud. ¿Qué estamos haciendo? Por un lado, pues ir en barco a los sitios, porque donde antes había carreteras, ahora no hay carreteras. Entonces, para prestar servicios mínimos de atención primaria, el sistema de distribución de artículos, igual en barco, porque los aviones imposible aterrizar, y es que estamos hablando de muchos millones, de cientos de miles de personas, ¿eh? Estamos hablando de 600.000 personas afectadas. No es ninguna tontería. Y si no llega agua y no llega comida y no llega atención médica, las tasas de mortalidad se van a disparar y de morbilidad. Y el apoyo a las comunidades, que aquí también somos muy eco-friendly, a la fuerza Orcan. ¿Qué hicimos? Pues utilizar canoas para poder llevar a la gente, es decir, ir a buscar a la gente donde se habían quedado aisladas, para en canoas llevarles a centros de salud o a los hospitales. Tienen ustedes las recomendaciones en la presentación, así que yo lo voy a dejar aquí por si entrara alguna pregunta o reflexión de alguien que nos han estado escuchando tan pacientemente, y se lo agradecemos muchísimo, o que nos vayamos a comer y recuperemos fuerzas. Gracias.
Thank you. No, maybe you want to stay there 1 second, and you have at least a microphone that works. So thank you very, very much. Also, really to remind us that the brunt of all the climate change that we're seeing is really borne by the people who are often living in poorer countries and where it's so much harder. So you're trying to help them in the hardest of conditions, and that made me think in the current environment, where it's all about navel gazing and focusing some countries on their own country. Do you see it's harder for you to acquire also funding for the important work you do?
It's one of the recommendations. There is a huge lack of there is a quite huge lack of funding. Now, especially, this is overlapped with the cut in the international cooperation funds. So directly, it does not affect us because MSF does not receive any public funds, because we decided as ourselves to preserve our independence. But of course, in terms of systemic it's clear. So just if you let it to me, the claim for today, for MSF today, could be please don't forget these populations in distress that are mainly the most affected. And it's very unfair, you know, like to say these are the most ones, but they are in quantity, in levels of mortality and morbidity, the most affected one, the populations that are in conflict settings, in less developed countries with violence, with political instability. Please don't let them behind, please.
I think you made that abundantly clear. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the organizers. Can we do one quick round, 5-minute wrap-up, or do we need to go to lunch?
We can talk in the lunch.
We can talk during lunch. Is that also okay with the panelists? Yeah, okay. Let's talk during lunch then. Thank you very much. Thank you much, panelists and audience. Thank you.
Thank you.